the infusion of positive energy into the lives of single Latter-day Saints everywhere. This is Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps. Another wonderful, splendiferous, joyous episode of Joy in the Journey Radio. I am Lance, your host for Joy in the Journey Radio, here in the JJ Thrive Zone, which I know it doesn't look very thriving, does it? But this is episode number 325. And today is book club day. And we're going to be discussing a very special book today. Today, we're going to be discussing Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol Dweck. Now, some of you may be familiar with the concept of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Have you ever heard of that dichotomy? Carol Dweck is the one who came up with it, right? Like, she didn't invent it, but it was her research that sort of revealed this perspective on how to see the world to everyone. And it's absolutely groundbreaking. And there's so much in this book where she talks about thriving. And I thought, hey, for Latter-day Saint singles who are looking to thrive in their singles lives, I just think that's something that we ought to, pay attention to. Of course, it's all based on science, but so much of what she talks about in her book, just how to say this, it aligns very well with a lot of the things we've been saying here on Join the Journey Radio. So, I just thought that this would be a really good book. And you know what? I got into the book. The more I got into the book, it's like, this is like the last book we looked at, The Obstacles of the Way by Ryan Holiday. It's like, man, I just don't, I don't know how to stop taking quotes from this thing, because this is just, there's so much good stuff here. It's like, I don't know what to pick. So, the thing I loved about the book is that she goes over general, overviewing principles, and then she goes into specific applications. I originally got into the book from my role as an educator, that's why I'm going back to school, so I can get the credential I need to be more competitive for the full-time teaching job I want. So that's, where I got interested in. That's where I first learned about the concept of fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And so I was looking at it from that. There's a section in the book where she talks about the interaction between students and students, and how so much of what we think we're offering is constructive, but it's really not. It's really the opposite. It's just the same thing with parenting. Sometimes the messages that a parent will give to a child, the parent will think that this is a constructive message, but it really isn't. If you don't understand the mentality of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, depending on which mindset you have, you're going to interpret the same thing in completely different ways. So it's really important to understand this distinction and to try to recognize, the people that you're interacting with, and to see, what mindset do they have? Because otherwise you may be offering something that you think is helpful, but in their mind, it's going to be anything but. So yeah, let's go ahead and dig into this. And we're going to start here, looking at the first quote. So you see, I kind of made some additions from last time. So now we've got a little counter here at the bottom of the screen that shows us, where are we at as far as quotes go. So that's a good thing. And some of these quotes are going to go kind of over the edge a little bit, as far as I can't fit everything onto one slide. But let's just dig in here. So it's one thing to have pundits spouting their opinions about scientific issues. It's another thing to understand how these views apply to you. For 20 years, my research has shown that the view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. I should have highlighted that in bold, because that seems like a really super important point. right? The view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. In other words, what we've been saying here on the program, how you think is everything, because everything comes out of how you think. It can determine whether you become the person you want to be and whether you accomplish the things you value. How does this happen? How can a simple belief have the power to transform your psychology and, as a result, your life? Believing that your qualities are carved in stone, the fixed mindset, creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. Does anyone know anyone like that? Like you can kind of tell, like the way they act. It's like they seem driven by this desire to prove themselves again and again, to prove that they have worth, that they have value, that they should be loved. I think we can all point to someone like that. We've all run across those types of people at some point in our lives. If you have only a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and a certain moral character, well, then you'd better prove that you have a healthy dose of them. It simply wouldn't do to look or feel deficient in these most basic characteristics. I've seen so many people with this one consuming goal of proving themselves in the classroom, in their careers, and in their relationships. Every situation calls for a confirmation of their intelligence, personality, or character. Every situation is evaluated. Will I succeed or fail? Will I look smart or dumb? Will I be accepted or rejected? Will I feel like a winner or a loser? But doesn't our society value intelligence, personality, and character? Yes, but there's another mindset in which those traits are not simply a hand you're dealt and have to live with. Always trying to convince yourself and others that you have a royal flush when you're secretly worried it's a pair of tens. In this mindset, the hand you're dealt is just the starting point for development. This growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things you can cultivate through your efforts. Although people may differ in every which way in their initial talents and aptitudes, interests, or temperaments, everyone can change and grow through application and experience. Do people with this mindset believe that anyone can be anything? That anyone with proper motivation and education can become Einstein or Beethoven? No, but they believe that a person's true potential is unknown and unknowable, that it's impossible to foresee what can be accomplished with years of passion, toil, and training. Now, the main reason why I included this quote first is to kind of ground people, because maybe you're watching this and you haven't read the book, which, okay, if you haven't read this book, go get this book, right? Go get it and start reading it. You'll start to be amazed, because there's truth bombs, baby. Truth bombs are in this thing. And the applications to Elia Single's life are just infinite. Take for example, this point that I've highlighted here in her quote: everyone can change and grow through application and experience. How often do we have that mentality of the fixed mindset, where we suffer a setback in our dating journey and we come to the conclusion that, well, this just isn't for us. This isn't made for us. We're not made for it. It's not right. And so therefore we just throw in the towel. I mean, there's so many of us who just want to just give up, when really the dating journey, like any journey in life, is about change and growth through application and experience. So you need to pick yourself up and give it a go again. Now, when you give it a go again, don't just keep doing the same things you were doing before, right? That's ridiculous. Don't be doing that. Don't be doing that. What you want to do is learn from your experiences so that you do change and grow. And that's how you become more than what you were before. And eventually you reach a point where things turn around and you start having more of the success that you really want. So here's our next quote. Did you know that Darwin and Tolstoy were considered ordinary children? That Ben Hogan, one of the greatest golfers of all time, was completely uncoordinated and graceless as a child? That the photographer Cindy Sherman, who has been on virtually every list of the most important artists of the 20th century, failed her first photography course? That Geraldine Page, one of our greatest actresses, was advised to give it up for a lack of talent? You can see how the belief that cherished qualities can be developed creates a passion for learning. When, of course, the opposite is true. you have the fixed mindset and you believe you either have it or you don't have it, then, you're not going to want to learn anything, because what's the point, right? It's like, if you don't have it, what's the point of learning? If you don't have it, you'll never have it. That's the fixed mindset. The growth mindset says, well, if you don't have it now, that just means you haven't applied yourself yet. And therefore, you need to improve. And the way to do that is through hard work, practice, application. You work on it. Why waste time proving over and over again how great you are when you could be getting better? Why hide deficiencies instead of overcoming them? Why look for friends or partners who will just shore up your self-esteem instead of ones who also challenge you to grow? And why seek out the tried and true instead of experiences that will stretch you? The passion for stretching yourself and sticking to it, even or especially when it's not going well, is the hallmark of the growth mindset. This is the mindset that allows people to thrive during some of the most challenging times in their lives. And I think that for many Latter-day Saint singles, I think that, we consider these singles years some of the most challenging times of our lives. So if we want to thrive during this time, that's why we get in that before. She has these direct references, and it just spoke to me. It's like, whoa, I got to put this in. If you want to thrive during your single years, you need to adopt the growth mindset. Learn about the differences between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, and try to identify the pieces in your life where you are displaying the fixed mindset, and then work to replace that with the growth mindset. And again, it's nothing that happens overnight. It takes time. It takes effort. It's a real journey, but it's well worth it. It is well worth it. Here's our next quote. Is this such a novel idea? We have lots of sayings that stress the importance of risk and the power of persistence, such as nothing ventured, nothing gained. And if at first you don't succeed, try again. Or Rome wasn't built in a day. By the way, I was delighted to learn that the Italians have the same expression. What is truly amazing is that people with the fixed mindset would not agree. For them, it's nothing ventured, nothing lost. If at first you don't succeed, you probably don't have the ability. If Rome wasn't built in a day, maybe it wasn't meant to be. In other words, risk and effort are two things that might reveal your inadequacies and show that you are not up to the task. In fact, it's startling to see the degree to which people with the fixed mindset do not believe in effort. What's also new is that people's ideas about risk and effort grow out of their more basic mindset. It's not just that some people happen to recognize the value of challenging themselves and the importance of effort. Our research has shown that this comes directly from the growth mindset. When we teach people the growth mindset with its focus on development, these ideas about challenge and effort follow. Similarly, it's not just that some people happen to dislike challenge and effort. When we temporarily put people in a fixed mindset with its focus on permanent traits, they quickly fear challenge and devalue effort. So this is why the growth mindset is key to thriving in your single years. Because if you don't have the growth mindset, then you're not going to welcome challenge. You're not going to welcome effort. You want everything to stay the same. You don't want anything to be rocking the boat, because your perception of risk and the value placed on effort is it's not going to be there. It's not going to be there. Everything becomes too risky, and you don't need to make any effort, because what's the point of making effort? You either have it or you don't. Right. And so, of course, if you don't make effort, you're not going to grow. And if you don't grow, then you're not going to become more than what you are now. You're not going to fulfill your potential. And essentially, you're going to keep having the life you have now. Nothing will change for you. So the way to get out of that very, very undesired rut is that you adopt the growth mindset, and you start focusing on development. You start focusing on ways that you can make efforts to improve upon yourself, and you keep hammering away at it. Here's the next quote, and I love this one. Check this out. When I was a young woman, that obviously it's not me. I'm quoting the author, who's a woman. When I was a young woman, I wanted a prince like me, very handsome, very successful, a big cheese. I wanted a glamorous career, but nothing too hard or risky. And I wanted it all to come to me as a validation of who I was. Gee, does that sound like anybody you may know? It would be many years before I was satisfied. I got a great guy, but he was a work in progress. I have a great career, but boy, is it a constant challenge. Nothing was easy. So why am I satisfied? I changed my mindset. It changed because of my work. One day, my doctoral student, Mary Bandura, and I were trying to understand why some students were so caught up in proving their ability while others could just let go and learn. Suddenly, we realized there were two meanings to ability, not one: a fixed ability that needs to be proven, and a challenging ability that can be developed through learning. That's how the mindsets were born. I knew instantly which one I had. I realized why I'd always been so concerned about mistakes and failures. And I recognized for the first time that I had a choice. This right here, I think, is pivotal, right? There's so many of us who are single, and we have this idea of what we want in a companion so that we're not single anymore. But listen to what she says here. It's like what she actually ends up with satisfies her, but it's nothing about what she was dreaming about. So, how does that work? And it works because she changed her mindset. This ties in so much with what we've been talking here on the program about, putting off the natural man, putting off the natural woman, and becoming a covenant man or a covenant woman, and valuing making and keeping sacred covenants above all else. And the only way to get rid of the natural man or the natural woman is through the atonement of Jesus Christ and letting his power, change you inside so that you no longer want what you wanted before. And I think that's the key part of why this act, why is she satisfied now? Because what she has now isn't what she dreamed of as a younger woman, what she thought she needed to have a wonderful life. And now she's got something very different, but she has a wonderful life. How does that work? She changed her mindset. She became something different inside. Now I don't know if she, was actually like applying the atonement to her life or whatnot. But we as Latter-day Saints know that we will become new creatures by applying the atonement into our lives. We know that that's true. This effort that we're looking at here with the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, I think can aid in that process of becoming new creatures in Christ. I think this has a role to play in helping us to get where we want to go. But the key part, I think, is right here at the end. I recognized for the first time I had a choice. You don't have to live with a fixed mindset. You can change and adopt a growth mindset. So as we continue to put in more quotes here and examine more of this book, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about the choices that you're making, and is it going to lead you to where you really want to be? Here's our next quote. When you enter a mindset, you enter a new world. In one world, the world of fixed traits, success is about proving you're smart or talented, validating yourself. In the other, the world of changing qualities, it's about stretching yourself to learn something new, developing yourself. In one world, failure is about having a setback, getting a bad grade, losing a tournament, getting fired, getting rejected. It means you're not smart or talented. In the other world, failure is about not growing, not reaching for the things you value. It means you're not fulfilling your potential. In one world, effort is a bad thing. It, like failure, means you're not smart or talented. If you were, you would need effort. In the other world, effort is what makes you smart or talented. You have a choice. Mindsets are just beliefs. They're powerful beliefs, but they're just something in your mind. And you can change your mind. As you read, think about where you'd like to go, which mindset will take you there. I think this is pivotal right here. You have a choice. You have a choice. So make the better one. Because one choice is always better than the other. So make the better one. Here's the next quote. Sometimes people with the growth mindset stretch themselves so far that they do the impossible. In 1995, Christopher Reeve, the actor, was thrown from a horse. His neck was broken, his spinal cord was severed from his brain, and he was completely paralyzed below the neck. Medical science said, "So sorry, come to terms with it." Reeve, however, started a demanding exercise program that involved moving all parts of his paralyzed body with the help of electrical stimulation. Why couldn't he learn to move again? Why couldn't his brain once again give commands that his body would obey? Doctors warned that he was in denial and was setting himself up for disappointment. They had seen this before, and it was a bad sign for his adjustment. But really, what else was Reeve doing with his time? Was there a better project? 5 years later, Reeve started to regain movement. First, it happened in his hands, then his arms, then legs, and then torso. He was far from cured, but brain scans showed that his brain was once more sending signals to his body that his body was responding to. Not only did Reeve stretch his abilities, he changed the entire way science thinks about the nervous system and its potential for recovery. In doing so, he opened a whole new vista for research and a whole new avenue of hope for people with spinal cord injuries. Now, I include this story from this quote, not just because it's a really cool, inspirational story, because it is, but those of us who are from the older generation recognize Christopher Reeves, the actor who played Superman in the first Superman movies that came out in the late 70s or early 80s. Christopher Reeve was the actor who played Superman. And I can still remember, in 1995, he got thrown from his horse. It made the news because this is the guy who played Superman, and now he's paralyzed from the waist down. But look at his comeback. I mean, and I can remember, people saying, 5 years later, when he was showing how much progress that he'd made, people are saying he really is Superman. He really is Superman. Look how far he's come from, everyone thought he would be paralyzed from the neck down for life. And now look at him. Now he's actually moving around. So, just think about the influence. I'm not saying that every time we adopt a growth mindset that something, fantastical like this is going to happen, but you never know the kind of influence you're going to have amongst other people, right? You just don't know. So, there's a lot to be said about adopting this growth mindset and just looking at it and saying, you don't know what you can do sometimes until you go out and do it. So be brave, be bold, take that step out, quit believing in, fixed qualities of anything and start believing in your ability and capacity to grow in any situation. So here is the next quote. Clearly, people with the growth mindset thrive when they're stretching themselves. When do people with the fixed mindset thrive? When things are safely within their grasp. If things get too challenging, when they're not feeling smart or talented, they lose interest. I watched that happen as we followed pre-med students through their first semester of chemistry. For many students, this is what their lives have led up to, becoming a doctor. And this is the course that decides who gets to be one. It's one heck of a hard course, too. The average grade on each exam is C+ for students who've rarely seen anything less than an A. Most students started out pretty interested in chemistry. Yet over the semester, something happened. Students with the fixed mindset stayed interested only when they did well right away. Those who found it difficult showed a big drop in their interest and enjoyment. If it wasn't a testimony to their intelligence, they couldn't enjoy it. In contrast, students with the growth mindset continued to show the same level of interest even when they found the work challenging. Challenge and interest went hand in hand. So the reason why I like this quote, first of all, I have to put a little disclaimer here. It's because I've taken a ton of chemistry courses when I was an undergrad in college. And I didn't think first semester chemistry was all that challenging, to be honest with you. I thought it was a pretty easy A. So what she says is one heck of a hard course too. It's well, okay, you're coming from a vantage point. I don't understand that because I didn't think it was all that challenging. Keep in mind, I had a lot of prep work, in high school. I took AP chemistry in high school. So I was kind of prepped for first semester chemistry when I got to college. So yeah, yeah, I did have that leg up, but I just thought that was like one heck of a hard course too. It's like, what are you talking about? um, but the reason why I put this quote in is because I liked her point about the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, right? If you have a fixed mindset, you're not going to do anything that's challenging. And let's face it, many of the things that are required for us to progress in our dating journey is challenging, right? So, in order for us to progress through the dating journey, uh, we have to embrace challenge. And we're not going to embrace the challenge if we have a fixed mindset. Because those with a fixed mindset view challenge as threatening. It's going to reveal that you're actually less than, that you're not validated, that you're not loved. And, so anything challenging, you lose interest in it. Whereas if you have a growth mindset, you welcome challenge because you know that it's through challenge that you're going to be able to grow and learn and become something more than what you were before. That this is the process of change. This is the process of eternal progression. So yeah, if you find yourself fearing challenge, take a step back and ask yourself, well, what mindset do I have right now? Now, here she says the plot is about to thicken. For in the fixed mindset, it's not enough just to succeed. It's not enough just to look smart and talented. You have to be pretty much flawless, and you have to be flawless right away. We asked people ranging from grade schoolers to young adults, when do you feel smart? The differences were striking. People with the fixed mindset said, it's when I don't make mistakes, when I finish something fast and it's perfect, when something is easy for me, but other people can't do it. It's about being perfect right now. But people with the growth mindset said, when it's really hard and I try really hard and I can do something I couldn't do before, or when I work on something a long time and I start to figure it out, for them, it's not about immediate perfection. It's about learning something over time, confronting a challenge and making progress. And I just thought, isn't this so applicable to dating? I mean, how many, potential dating candidates, decide not to make the agreement to move to the next stage of the dating journey with someone because that person is not perfect right now. We insist on immediate perfection, then we're listening to the natural man or the natural woman. And these are enemies of God because God's plan for us is not about immediate perfection. It's about incremental perfection that we gain little by little, piece by piece, a little here, a little there, as we read in Isaiah, one step at a time. That's his plan. So if we're expecting something, magically perfect to just come out of the woodwork, we're not conforming to the covenant man or the covenant woman. We're conforming to the natural man or the natural woman. And, again, they're enemies to God because that attitude prevents people from progressing in their journey, right? Because, like we said so far, it's one of the fundamental principles of the dating journey is that if you don't have an agreement, you don't progress. It's really no more complicated than that. And I love here how she looks at this through the lens of the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. The fixed mindset said it's about being perfect right now, right? And that's why, people get rejected for not being immediately perfect because the fixed mindset says if you're not perfect now, you never will be. The fixed mindset doesn't have any room or tolerance for growth or change. Whereas the growth mindset, look at the name, growth mindset. It's all about growth. It's all about change. So, it's not about immediate perfection with the growth mindset. You accept a work in progress because you're assessing direction rather than position. So I love this quote because it's talking so much to me about like so much of what I've seen in my own life and the lives of other Latter-day Saint singles. When you talk about the dating journey and the expectations that are placed upon people, and it goes both ways. Um, I just observationally, it seems like it's more the women on the men than the men on the women, but I, I don't have any objective data to back that up. So I'm just not going to go there and make a conclusion. But we got to get rid of this idea of wanting people to be perfect immediately. And that's the perfect part about, when you have the covenant mindset, the thing that matters most is keeping sacred covenants. And so as long as you show that you're willing to work within that framework, then everything else can come. Everything else that's truly important can come thereafter. Now that doesn't mean that we're, interchangeable parts. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But, what I am suggesting is that a lot of the things that we think are deal breakers really aren't, nor should they be. And yet we consider them to be deal breakers. And in the process, we're holding ourselves up, we're holding other people up. A lot of people are staying single longer than they need to be. Here's the next quote, and I love this. This is great. Janet Cook and Stephen Glass were both young reporters who skyrocketed to the top on fabricated articles. Janet Cook won a Pulitzer Prize for her Washington Post articles about an 8-year-old boy who was a drug addict. The boy did not exist, and she was stripped of her prize. Stephen Glass was the whiz kid of the New Republic who seemed to have stories and sources reporters only dream of. The sources did not exist, and the stories were not true. Did Janet Cook and Stephen Glass need to be perfect right away? Did they feel that admitting ignorance would discredit them with their colleagues? Did they feel they should already be like the big-time reporters before they did the hard work of learning how? We were stars, precocious stars, wrote Stephen Glass, and that was what mattered. The public understands them as cheats, and cheat they did, but I understand them as talented young people, desperate young people who succumbed to the pressures of the fixed mindset. There was a saying in the 1960s that went, becoming is better than being. The fixed mindset does not allow people the luxury of becoming. They have to already be. Now, this I thought was a really great example to illustrate the differences at play here. You look at something like, here we're talking about like people in their profession, but I'm sure we all know people in the dating arena who try to pretend that there's something they're not in order to get the date. And we see this with men and women, and we've all heard these stories, and maybe you yourself have felt that urge to try to be something you're not in order to secure that agreement you need in order to progress to the next stage of your dating journey. And of course, honesty is always the best policy. It's never wise to pretend you're something that you're not. But this gets people frustrated, right? It's like, well, if honesty is the best policy, then how am I supposed to progress? And the answer is you reject the fixed mindset that you have, adopt the growth mindset, and make changes in you. I love this saying that she's quoting from the 60s, which I'd never heard of before I read her book, but I love it. It says, becoming is better than being. Becoming is better than being. Direction matters more than position. Direction matters more than position. Becoming is better than being. What if the filters that we had for dating candidates were focused more on a candidate's becoming rather than a candidate's being? So many of the lists that we have, especially when you're talking about like deal breakers, they're focused on being, they're not focused on becoming. They're not focused on direction. There's no tolerance for, not being perfect right now. This plays into what we were talking about with the last quote. It's part of why I put this in. Again, I think we need to step back and make an assessment of what we really are considering deal breakers, and are they grounded in a fixed mindset that insists that people be perfect right now, or we're not going to go forward with them because it's too risky? Or are we going to adopt the growth mindset and accept a work in progress who's moving in the right direction, you know, I think we need to step back and really self-assess how we're approaching the dating journey. And I think that with a new approach that's more effective, we'll get much better results. And, we'll have much more enjoyment along the way. I mean, this idea that, if you don't have perfect, you're settling for second best is a product of the natural mindset. And it's related to this fixed mindset that Carol Dweck is talking about. It really is, because it's tied in with this notion, this assumption that if you don't have it, you never will. Right? If I want to marry someone who's less than, I'll never be happy. Well, that assumes that this person's never going to change. That assumes this person can't change. That is a product of the fixed mindset that Carol Dweck is talking about here. And it's not going to help you thrive in your single years or in any other years of your life for that matter. Let's just be honest. Thriving only happens with the growth mindset, period. So let's focus on becoming, not being. And when we're looking at dating candidates, let's ask ourselves, what is this person becoming? What direction is this person headed in? If I hitch my wagon here, where am I going to end up 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? What direction is this person going? I think having dating criteria that focuses more on becoming rather than being will give us a lot more joy in our dating journey. Here's the next quote. As a psychologist and an educator, I'm vitally interested in depression. It runs wild on college campuses, especially in February and March. Yet different students handle depression in dramatically different ways. Not long ago, we decided to see whether mindsets play a role in this difference. Here's what we discovered. First, the students with the fixed mindset had higher levels of depression. They ruminated over their problems and setbacks, essentially tormenting themselves with the idea that the setbacks meant they were incompetent or unworthy. Again, failures labeled them and left them no route to success. There were still plenty of people with the growth mindset who felt pretty miserable, this being the peak season for depression. But the more depressed people with the growth mindset felt, the more they took action to confront their problems, to keep up with their schoolwork and their lives. The worse they felt, the more determined they became. In short, when people believe in fixed traits, they are always in danger of being measured by a failure. It can define them in a permanent way. Smart or talented as they may be, this mindset seems to rob them of their coping resources. When people believe their basic qualities can be developed, failures may still hurt, but failures don't define them. If abilities can be expanded, if change and growth are possible, then there are still many paths to success. I think this is so key, so pivotal for us to remember as we're going through our dating journey. There are many paths to success. No matter what we encounter in our dating journey, there are always still many paths to success. We get into this fixed mindset of, if this didn't work, it's because I'm not good enough. And, going back to the fundamentals of the dating journey, maybe you're not. But the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset is that the fixed mindset looks at that and says, well, there's no point in doing anything about it because you can't do anything about it. Because if you're not good enough now, you never will be. Your qualities are fixed. Failure is an identity. Whereas people with the growth mindset would look at that and say, well, no, this just means that you weren't good enough. You're not good enough yet. If you keep, working on yourself and keep making changes in yourself to where you become agreeable enough, then you can have the success that you want. There are still many paths to success, regardless of, whatever happens to us. So people with the growth mindset, failure is not an identity. Failure is just an event. It's an opportunity to learn. So you look at your failure and you ask yourself, well, why didn't this work out? What is it about me that needs to change? What do I need to work on? What do I need to improve about myself so that in a future opportunity, I have a different outcome? That's the growth mindset, believing that there's still many paths to success. And there's just so much more positive energy with the growth mindset than there's with the fixed mindset. You look at it, you're like, well, duh. But then, if you were to take like an honest, hard look at yourself and your life and the choices that you've made, you'd be amazed at how many of them were made with the fixed mindset in place. And I can think back to like my 20s when a lot of the thinking that I had around dating resembled the fixed mindset. A lot of it did. And I'll be honest with you, my 20s were not really exactly a highlight of my life. I wasn't feeling all that great a lot of the time. I had moments, don't get me wrong. I mean, I had some really good moments and I've been blessed, but as far as dating goes, not a good part of my life at all when I was in my 20s. So, you know, when I started to make some changes, I didn't even know that this is what I was doing, but I was making changes into the growth mindset. And as I started to make those changes, then the way I feel about myself, my life, my future, all of this stuff, it just started to open up. And so, this growth mindset stuff is real, and it's why we're talking about it. Like I said, this book got truth bombs, peeps. So let's soldier on here. Here's our next quote. What was that about the course of true love? Oh yeah. So now, the previous quotes were all about like from the beginning of her book, where she's talking about like the differences between the mindsets. So you kind of get a feel for what's what. And then she goes in like individual chapters where she talks about different applications. So there's a whole chapter where she talks about parents interacting with their kids, teachers interacting with their students. There's a chapter where she talks about relationships, and that's where we're going to take the rest of the quotes from that chapter, where she's talking about relationships. Again, there's so much here that I can't put everything in, which is why you got to get this book and read it, right? You got to get the whole kit and bang. Get all the beans in that burrito, baby. Anyway, so now we're going to start talking about like relationship stuff. And just a disclaimer, like most of the relationship stuff she's talking about is about people who are married. But there are some points where she talks about people who aren't married yet. They're actually getting in a relationship that leads to marriage. But I think even though a lot of the focus that she has in this relationship chapter is upon marriage, there's a lot about what she says with the growth mindset and the fixed mindset and the differences between them that have direct applicability to our dating lives, or the dating lives we'd like to have in the case of some people who aren't dating right now. Anywho, let's dive in. What was that about the course of true love never running smooth? Well, the course to true love isn't so smooth either. That path is often strewn with disappointments and heartbreaks. Some people let these experiences scar them and prevent them from forming satisfying relationships in the future. Others are able to heal and move on. What separates them? To find out, we recruited more than 100 people and asked them to tell us about a terrible rejection. Almost everyone at one time or another had been in love and had been hurt. What differed, and differed dramatically, was how they dealt with it. Then here's the key point right here. When people had the fixed mindset, they felt judged and labeled by the rejection. Because again, for the fixed mindset, failure is not an event. Failure is an identity. It felt permanently labeled. It was as though a verdict had been handed down and branded on their foreheads. Unlovable. And they lashed out. If you have ever felt this way, pay attention here, peeps, because what we're talking about here is your fixed mindset, and the way you think has given you a lot of the negative emotions that you've experienced. And the link is it's right here, documented with this study that she did, where she's research asking people about traumatic romantic experiences that they had. When people had the fixed mindset, they felt judged and labeled by the rejection, permanently labeled. It was as though a verdict had been handed down and branded on their foreheads, unlovable, and they lashed out. Because the fixed mindset gives them no recipe for healing their wound. All they could do was hope to wound the person who inflicted it. In fact, for people with the fixed mindset, their number one goal came through loud and clear: revenge. During the study, I asked one of my fixed mindset friends about her divorce. I'll never forget what she said. If I had to choose between me being happy and him being miserable, I would definitely want him to be miserable. Think about that. Think about that, peeps. Now, there's more to this quote. Let's see what the growth mindset has to say about this. It had to be a person with the fixed mindset who coined the phrase, revenge is sweet. The idea that with revenge comes your redemption, because people with the growth mindset have little taste for it. The stories they told were every bit as wrenching, but their reactions couldn't have been more different. For them, it was about understanding, forgiving, and moving on. Although they were often deeply hurt by what happened, they wanted to learn from it. That relationship and how it ended really taught me the importance of communicating. I used to think love conquers all, but now I know it needs a lot of help. That same man went on to say, I also learned something about who's right for me. I guess every relationship teaches you more about who's right for you. For people with the growth mindset, the number one goal was forgiveness. As one woman said, I'm no saint, but I knew for my own peace of mind that I had to forgive and forget. He hurt me, but I had a whole life waiting for me, and I'll be damned if I was going to live it in the past. Because of their growth mindset, they did not feel permanently branded. Because of it, they tried to learn something useful about themselves and relationships, something they could use toward having a better experience in the future. And they knew how to move on and embrace that future. And this, I think, is the key. This, I think, is the key toward experiencing the maximum amount of joy in our dating journey. Every relationship teaches you more about who's right for you. Every experience that you have, whether it comes out the way you want or not, has something to teach you. So learn from that. Learn from that. Step back and say, what can I take from this that will make me a better person? And the fixed mindset with its focused on revenge and, feeling justified and feeling compensation and leveling the playing field. I mean, what is that? Whereas here, the growth mindset, clearly the growth mindset is on the side of charity, where, people with the growth mindset are like, look, we want to understand what happened so we can learn from it and improve for the future. We're going to forgive the person because we don't need to carry that baggage with us. And we're going to move on. We're going to move on. Keep in mind, that, one of the key differences I see here between, the people who, the fixed mindset, they want revenge. They're not interested in growth. They're not interested in becoming something more than they were before. They're not interested in progressing toward their eternal home. They just want to hold someone else back. They just want someone else to be hurt because they're hurting. But the way you get rid of the hurt is with the growth mindset and learning to let go of that and realizing that, no, this isn't labeling you. This is not identifying you. What this is doing is giving you an opportunity to learn and to grow. Every relationship teaches you more about who's right for you. This is why, I'm of the opinion that, there are people who say that, if you, unless you know someone is like the right type for you, you shouldn't be dating them. And even if you suspect that they're the wrong type, you shouldn't date them. And I just completely disagree with that. I think we need to be a lot more open in who it is that we're dating. We need more of these experiences to teach us more about who's right for us. And there are all many times, if we have the hubris, the arrogance to think that we already know what's best for us, come on. I mean, we've all had these experiences and we've heard stories about how, people thought that one life direction, going to school at a particular school, and they end up not going to that school. But then they learn that, that's not, they look back in 2020 and realize, you know what, that thing that I didn't want to have happen was actually the best thing that happened to me. Um, you know, Look at, for example, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. He talks about how, when he, was out of high school, he signed a deal with the Canadian Football League. He wanted to be in the NFL, and yet, this failed experience that he had with the CFL, led him into his wrestling career. And looking back, he's like, well, this was the best thing that never happened to me. So, I really disagree with these people who, they look and they judge each other and they say, well, this person is not good for me because of XYZ. And, maybe that's right, but maybe it's not. We should not have the hubris or the arrogance to say that we know absolutely 100% in all cases. We need to be open to saying, yeah, I'm willing to let experience teach me a thing or two. Have that humility about us to say, I'm willing to go into this direction. There's so much that there's so much here that we can get into, but I'm looking at the clock and we got so much more to get into. So let's get at it. So far, having a fixed mindset has meant believing your personal traits are fixed, but in relationships, two more things enter the picture: your partner and the relationship itself. Now you can have a fixed mindset about three things. You can believe that your qualities are fixed, your partner's qualities are fixed, and the relationship's qualities are fixed, that it's inherently good or bad, meant to be or not meant to be. Now all of these things are up for judgment. The growth mindset says that all of these things can be developed. All, you, your partner, and the relationship are capable of growth and change. In the fixed mindset, the ideal is instant, perfect, and perpetual compatibility, like it was meant to be, like riding off into the sunset, like they lived happily ever after. Many people want to feel their relationship is special and not just some chance occurrence. This seems okay. So what's the problem with the fixed mindset? There are two. One, if you have to work at it, it wasn't meant to be. Two, problems indicate character flaws. And I want us to just stop and just take a step back and ask ourselves, how prevalent are these two ideas within the Latter-day Saint dating culture? I want us to ask this question. It's like, this is where I wish I had a co-host and like guests coming onto the program, because I would love to have like discussion about these types of topics, but everyone I've asked so far said no. So you're left with lonesome little me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's what it is. But I think this question is worth discussing. How prevalent are these ideas within Latter-day Saint dating culture? I think they're very prevalent, to be honest with you. If you have to work at it, it wasn't meant to be. I mean, I've seen so many that they just don't want to do the work. I just don't want to do the work. So if there's any sort of problem, it means that there's something wrong and they need to be it's not working. You have a problem. That's an indication you're moving in the wrong direction. You need to change course, when really it's par for the course and you need to work through the problem. Because this is how the relationship helps you become more of what you were meant to be. You don't get that if you don't do the work. And this is why the covenant mindset is so key, because to covenant mindset, people with a covenant mindset, making and keeping sacred covenants is the most important thing. So as long as you're willing to stay in that space, you can work through your problem. Right? It's just it's when you take the natural mindset, you have that aspect of it, and you value what evolutionary biology values, which is all about getting the best genetic materials so you can spawn the next generation with it. That's what the natural mindset cares about. And the fixed mindset of being ideal, perfect, and perpetually compatible. Oh wow. That attitude, I think, runs rampant, okay, especially amongst the 20-somethings, the so-called young single adults. I say so-called because, hey, you know what? When I was in my 30s, I felt like I was still young, and I was compared to what I am now. So, anyway, I've got a few more quotes. Let's dig in. to these two items in more detail. So the first problem, one problem is that people with the fixed mindset expect everything good to happen automatically. It's not that the partners will work to help each other solve their problems or gain skills. It's that this will magically occur through their love, sort of the way it happened to Sleeping Beauty, whose coma was cured by her prince's kiss, or to Cinderella, whose miserable life was suddenly transformed by her prince. And then she gives us this example about a woman named Charlene. And I love this story because of what it teaches. Charlene's friends told her about Max, the new musician in town. He had come to play cello with the symphony orchestra. The next night, Charlene and her friends went to see the orchestra's performance. And when they went backstage afterward, Max took Charlene's hand and said, "Next time, let's make it longer." She was taken with his intense romantic air, and he was taken with her charming manner and exotic looks. As they went out, can anyone say pheromones? As they went out, the intensity grew. They seemed to understand each other deeply. They enjoyed the same things: food, analyzing people, travel. They both thought, "Where have you been all my life?" Over time, though, Max became moody. Actually, that's how he was. It just didn't show at first. When he was in a bad mood, he wanted to be left alone. Charlene wanted to talk about what was bothering him, but that irritated him. "Just leave me alone," he would insist, more and more forcefully. Charlene, however, would feel shut out. This continues on the next slide. It says, friends, seeing how much they cared about each other, urged them to work on this problem. But they both felt with great sorrow that if the relationship were the right one, they wouldn't have to work so hard. If it were the right relationship, they would just be able to understand and honor each other's needs. So they grew apart and eventually broke up. In the growth mindset, there may still be that exciting initial combustion, but people don't expect magic. They believe that a good, lasting relationship comes from effort and from working through inevitable differences. But those with the fixed mindset don't buy that. Remember the fixed mindset idea that if you have ability, you shouldn't have to work hard? This is the same belief applied to relationships. If you're compatible, everything should just come naturally. Every single relationship expert disagrees with this. Says John Gottman, a foremost relationship researcher, every marriage demands an effort to keep it on the right track. There is a constant tension between the forces that hold you together and those that can tear you apart. As with personal achievement, this belief that success should not need effort robs people of the very thing they need to make their relationship thrive. It's probably why so many relationships go stale, because people believe that being in love means never having to do anything taxing. I don't need to make any commentary on this. I think this speaks for itself. Truth bomb, people. Total 100% pure truth bomb. And how many of us have seen this? This is why I was asking that question earlier. It's like, how prevalent are these ideas within Larry St. dating culture? Because I think this is one idea that's very prevalent, that we don't need to work through differences. And that, if the differences between us are big enough, if the problem is big enough, that's a sign that we're going the wrong way and we need to break apart. When really, it's just, you have to decide how much work you're willing to do. Right? At the end of the day, you've got to decide how much work you're willing to do to get the relationship that you want. That's just all there is to it, because no relationship comes without work, without effort on somebody's part. It's just not going to happen. Here's the next quote. Part of a low effort belief is the idea that couples should be able to read each other's minds. There's no way any one of us knows anyone like this, right? We are like one. My partner should know what I think, feel, and need, and I should know what my partner thinks, feels, and needs. But this is impossible. Mind reading instead of communicating inevitably backfires. And she's got another story here. Elaine Savage, noted family psychologist, describes Tom and Lucy After 3 months together, Tom informed Lucy that there was an imbalance in their relationship. Lucy, reading his mind, decided Tom meant that he was less into the relationship than she was. She felt discouraged. Should she break off the relationship before he did? However, after a therapy session, Lucy got up the courage to find out what he meant. Tom, it turned out, had been using a musical term to convey his wish to fine-tune the relationship and move it to the next level. It's strange to believe in mind reading, but it makes sense when you realize that many people with a fixed mindset believe that a couple should share all of each other's views. If you do, then you don't need communication. You can just assume your partner sees things the way you do. Raymond Nee and his colleagues had couples come in and discuss their views of their relationship. Those with the fixed mindset felt threatened and hostile after talking about even minor discrepancies in how they and their partner saw their relationship. Even a minor discrepancy threatened their belief that they shared all of each other's views. It's impossible for a couple to share all of each other's assumptions and expectations. One may assume the wife will stop working and be supported, the other that she will be an equal breadwinner. One may assume they will have a house in the suburbs, the other that they will have a bohemia love nest. Foremost relationship researcher John Gottman reports, I've interviewed newlywed men who told me with pride, I'm not going to wash the dishes. No way. That's a woman's job. 2 years later, the same guys asked me, why don't my wife and I have sex anymore? Gee, yeah, go figure, dude. Great mystery there. Now, a couple may agree on traditional roles. That's up to them, but that's different from assuming it as an entitlement. A no-effort relationship is a doomed relationship, not a great relationship. It takes work to communicate accurately, and it takes work to expose and resolve conflicting hopes and beliefs. It doesn't mean there is no they lived happily ever after, but, and I love this part, it's more like they worked happily ever after. If we could just take this mentality and have it be like part of the core feature of the way that we approach dating as Latter-day Saint singles, I don't think we'd see the average age at which Latter-day Saints get married going up. I'd say we see it coming down. A lot of us would get married a lot sooner because it would open up our minds to realize it's not about finding perfection. It's about finding someone who's moving toward perfection. This is, I mean, just, I love that. I love this. This is no, there is no, they lived happily ever after. They worked happily ever after. And to be honest with you, I don't think any of us would really be happy if we got into a situation where there was no growth required. We wouldn't really be happy with that because we're not really happy without growth. Growth and, this idea of continual improvement and progression, this is where the joy comes from, because ultimately we are all spiritual beings having an earthly existence. We're not earthly beings having spiritual experiences. We're spiritual beings having earthly experiences. And because we're spiritual beings, we were bred for progression. We were born with this potential to return home to live with our Heavenly Father. So this idea of progression is bred in us. And that's why we find joy whenever we're progressing in any area of our life. It helps us to feel good. Why? Because we're responding to the way we were made. We're aligning ourselves with our birthright. So, again, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves if we're approaching dating the right way. Do we have this attitude of they lived happily ever after, or do we have the attitude of they worked happily ever after? And what are we looking for? How are we designing the filters that we have when we're screening candidates for dating? Are we, eliminating people who are willing to work toward happiness because they're not in a certain position that we want the person to be right now, this person doesn't have qualities X, Y, and Z, and so therefore this person is not going to do. When if the person is actually making and keeping sacred covenants and they're willing to work after happiness, well, maybe there's something that could be there. But we decide, no, we're not gonna deal with it because we want perfection instantaneously. And again, I think we need to take a step back and take a look at what mindset do we have here? Do we have the fixed mindset or the growth mindset? Because the fixed mindset is not going to leave us to thriving. The growth mindset is. So a couple more quotes before we wrap up today. We're really, really big episode here. The second big difficulty with the fixed mindset is the belief that problems are a sign of deep-seated flaws. But just as there are no great achievements without setbacks, there are no great relationships without conflicts and problems along the way. When people with a fixed mindset talk about their conflicts, they assign blame. Sometimes they blame themselves, but often they blame their partner. And they assign blame to a trait, a character flaw. But it doesn't end there. When people blame their partner's personality for the problem, they feel anger and disgust towards them, and it barrels on. Since the problem comes from fixed traits, it can't be solved. So once people with the fixed mindset see flaws in their partners, they become contemptuous of them and dissatisfied with the whole relationship. Here's the key point. That's why I highlighted it. People with the growth mindset, on the other hand, can see their partner's imperfections and still think they have a fine relationship. You can look at somebody who's not top shelf and think, I'm going to have a great relationship with this person. This is why it's possible, right? Because you get rid of that natural mindset with its emphasis on what's important to evolutionary biology, and you start adopting the covenant mindset with its importance on what really matters in eternity. And this right here, I mean, I love the way she worded this here. You're looking at character flaws, and the fixed mindset says, hey, if you don't have it, whatever it is, if you don't have it, you'll never have it. But the people with the growth mindset are like, well, if you don't have it, it's just because you don't have it yet. And they're willing to work within the space of the relationship to help that person obtain it. So if it's something that's really, truly important to you, my recommendation is be willing to work with someone. And this is why, again, I think you really need to be dating people like a casual date at least 3 times in 3 different settings, 3 different environments, so that 3 different activities, so that you have more data to truly assess and say, what direction is this person going in? You can't really make that assessment with one date, because one date is just one data point. In order to get a line on a graph, you need at least 2. And that's why I say 3, because with 3 points, you've got a really good idea of, what direction someone's headed in. And then you can sit back and ask, does this look like a wagon I might want to hitch my ride to? Right? And if it looks like it might be, then you can try to move into the next stage of the dating journey, which is exclusive dating. And you can get more data points to assess, hey, is this person going to take me somewhere where I really want to be? If I hitch my wagon here, where am I going to be 5, 10, 15 years from now? What does it look like? And, make that assessment on whether or not you see. But you see, that's the growth mindset, though. I think a lot of us have the fixed mindset. Oh, I'm sorry. You're not 6 foot tall, so forget it. Or whatever the filter is, the thing that we're looking at, whatever it is, like you don't have it, so therefore you'll never have it. And we place importance on things that don't really make a whole bit of difference in the long run. One more quote I'll leave you with before we head out. Penelope's friend sat at home complaining that there were no good men. Oh, We don't know anybody that this would apply to, right? Penelope's friends sat at home complaining that there were no good men. Penelope went out and found them. Each time she would find a great guy and fall head over heels. He's the one, she'd tell her friends as she began reading the bridal magazines and practically writing the announcement for the local paper. They'd believe her because he was always a guy with a lot going for him. But then something would happen. It was over for one of them when he got her a tacky birthday present. Another put ketchup on his food and sometimes wore white shoes. Another had bad electronic habits. His cell phone etiquette was poor and he watched too much TV. And this is only a partial list. Assuming traits were fixed, Penelope would decide that she couldn't live with these flaws. But most of these were not deep or serious character problems that couldn't be addressed with a little communication. Penelope assumed that somewhere out there was someone who was already perfect. Relationship expert Daniel Wild says that choosing a partner is choosing a set of problems. There are no problem-free candidates. The trick is to acknowledge each other's limitations and build from there. Yeah, I love that. I love this idea. It's like when you're choosing a partner, you're really choosing your set of problems because everybody comes with problems. So you just have to pick your poison, right? Which set of problems do you want to deal with? Because there are no problem-free candidates. As it says here, the trick is to acknowledge each other's limitations and build from there. And I'm reminded of that famous quote from one of my favorite prophets, President Hinckley, Gordy. You know, we used to meet for lunch. I call him Gordy. Actually, I'm just kidding about the lunch part. But yeah, that famous quote where he talks about how, life is like an old time train ride, lots of bumps, there's no, anyone who thinks that life is going to be blissful after marriage is in for a real education because, most putts don't drop. Most meat is tough. Most marriages require a high degree of toleration. That's from both partners, by the way, and then, he goes on to say, there's smoke and cinders, but there's also thrilling vistas and rush of speed. And he says the trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride. And I think that's right in line with what we see here from Carol Dweck. The trick is to acknowledge each other's limitations and build from there. Understand that there is no perfection, right? I mean, we're here as part of a journey towards perfection. So why should we be expecting perfection now when there's still more journey to be had? It doesn't make any sense. What makes more sense is to adopt the growth mindset and to look at this situation and say, okay, there are no problem-free candidates. I'm going to have to work through something. So let's look at this other person and let's look at the virtues that this person's offering and say, okay, is this person going to take me somewhere where I want to go? If the answer is yes, then let's have an acknowledgement that, okay, there are some imperfections that I want to work through here. Is this person willing to work through them? And this is where, we need to take more time with the dating. We need to take enough time. This is another reason why I say 3 dates, people, 3 dates. Because one of the things you're assessing is not only which direction this person is willing to go, but is this person willing to acknowledge and address imperfections? What is this person's like actually doing to improve himself or herself? And looking at that assessment and saying, okay, are you willing to work with this? Right? Because if you're not willing to work on something, then to me, that's a red flag. It says, get out. Right? That's just going to be more problems down the road. So, and again, when you go into the next stage of the dating journey, which is the exclusive dating, spending some time in there to get to really know and understand the person. And you'll have, I guarantee you're going to have experiences where you're going to find problems, limitations, and then, ask yourself, okay, are we willing to work through a problem that we find? And if the other person is not willing to work through a problem, then to me, that's a red flag. And you need to get out of that. You just say, break this off. And you shouldn't have any bones about saying, this is why I'm doing it. And they can, make whatever excuse they want, but successful people don't make excuses. Successful people make a way. And if they're making ways, if they're making excuses, then that's a first sign they're a loser. And you just need to just say, okay, you're not what I need in my life. You're not going to help me achieve my highest potential. So we're going to part ways here. I mean, really, I think a lot of the things that we're looking at and assessing when we look at the dating, I think the things that we're using as filters are just things that don't really matter in the long run for most of them, and the ones that may matter more in the long run. We're not approaching this approach here, where it says we're not acknowledging each other's limitations and displaying a willingness to build from that point. Most of us are just like, well, okay, so you don't have it, therefore, goodbye. I'll swipe, swipe you away. That's why I hate these phone apps, because these phone apps are not encouraging this attitude. They're not, so then what are you doing on them? Get off, especially if you're a guy, because they're just, all these dating apps, they're made to get money out of, thirsty men. That's my opinion, but I mean, we can talk about that later. Anyway, this is the last quote. So I got for you peeps. You can see why it's like, I've been wanting to get a co-host and, people come on the program to talk about this stuff, but everyone that I've talked to so far has said no. So if you're willing to come onto the program and, talk about some of this stuff, then, hey, hit me up, jointhejrneyradio.com/contact, let me know of your interest and we can see what we can do from there. And because I think having discussions about all of these topics would be very helpful for all of us. But as it is, I'm all you got. So hopefully I gave you something that was useful. Again, if you haven't read this book, then yeah, that's what we're going to be. The next book we'll read for book club, I have it right here, is my Join the Journey Radio microphone here. Anyway, this is the next book right here. Mitch Albom's The Little Liar. Work of fiction. I kind of had second thoughts about it's not really nonfiction. Nonfiction is really easier to talk about with book club, but I think there's some things here in this book. So I started reading it. I'm like, yeah, I think there's some things in here in this book that we could pull out to help us thrive in our single years. So this is what we're reading for next month. So if you want to be a part of the discussion, hey, get reading. And so yeah, hopefully I have offered you something that was useful. And if not, then I'm sorry. Come back next week and we'll have more success with that. Leave some comments below. Let's get some discussion going. And hopefully we can help one another to thrive in our single year. So, come back next week for another wonderful, exciting episode of Join Journey Radio. And until then, this is your host reminding you there's joy to be had all along your journey. Let's take that joy and journey on.